My name is Rachel Cherry, and I am the lead digital accessibility developer at the University of Rochester in New York in the United States. Some of you, or maybe most of you, also know me as the founder of WPCampus and a board member. These days, I spend a lot of my time, though, in accessibility, and accessibility really has been a primary focus of my entire career. And so these days, I have transitioned from being a WordPress specific developer to being a technical accessibility developer. I'm in charge of our university's, the technical aspects of our university's accessibility compliance program, but I am part of a team of two with a wonderful director, Eva Zinnerman, and together we design, implement, and carry out our accessibility strategies for how we are improving enterprise accessibility at our university. So let's cover our goals for this session. I want you all to understand how process and governance shape accessibility outcomes at scale. We work in a very enterprise environment, which generally means large and many users. And our processes for how we manage governance and accessibility compliance are different when in these enterprise environments compared to, for example, a single website or smaller websites with few users. We want to explore how data reveals patterns, focus areas, and opportunities for improvement. I want to examine a real-world example of how we use data-driven accessibility governance at our university. I want us to learn a repeatable framework for measuring, acting on, and sustaining progress. And I would love for you to leave with practical ideas for how to make accessibility measurable, visible, and sustainable at your organization. So why does accessibility governance matter? Well, we talked about this a little bit with Joe. Accessibility isn't just a technical issue, it's a governance issue, especially in large-scale enterprise environments like higher education. Policies, training, and audits, they help, but they're not enough when you're managing hundreds of sites, contributors, and competing priorities. Most of us in higher ed, and I would say the internet at large, want to create accessible digital experiences, but in ecosystems that are often trying to do too much with too few resources, we can't rely on good intentions alone. Governance is how we align people, process, and policy, and data is what makes that alignment measurable and actionable. Without processes, accessibility stays reactive, which means we end up fixing what's broken instead of building systems that enable accessible, high-quality digital products from the get-go. When we combine clear processes with meaningful data and supportive systems, accessibility becomes part of our operations and not just items on a to-do list. Accessibility governance is about strengthening our processes, using data to stay accountable, and then sustaining accessibility across our large and complex environments. Because as our ecosystems grow and change, with hundreds of WordPress sites managed by different teams and priorities, accessibility governance becomes exponentially more complex. So let's explore why accessibility tends to break down at scale and what it takes to regain consistency and visibility across our distributed environments. Scale is challenging. As our digital ecosystems grow, complexity multiplies. In higher ed, one university might have hundreds of WordPress sites, whether it's an admissions site, colleges, labs, centers, departments. I'm sure we all have very similar workflows we can put together about our different types of websites and how they work together. Each website has its own design, potentially, maybe have a different set of plugins, and has a different set of users and editors. Every site may have different people maintaining content, it may have different expectations, and it may have different levels of technical expertise. And the result is that accessibility becomes fragmented. Different teams with different processes, and there's no unified visibility. One team might use an accessibility plugin, another one might just run audits twice a year, a third team might rely on student workers with limited training and experience. Everyone's trying, but nobody has a complete picture. And that's one real challenge of scale. Having a consistent way to see what's working and what isn't working. Reporting stays manual, metrics are inconsistent, and leadership often doesn't know whether accessibility is improving, stalling, or moving backwards. Even with passionate teams and strong intent, accessibility remains reactive. We fix issues after they're published, rather than preventing them through system-level processes. In large web ecosystems, accessibility doesn't fail because people don't care. It fails because processes don't scale. This is where governance, and especially data-informed governance, becomes essential. Data can give us visibility across all these moving parts and can turn hundreds of disconnected efforts into a single coherent picture. So let's look at what kinds of data enable that visibility and how the right metrics can actually make governance sustainable at scale. Once we recognize that scale introduces fragmentation, the next step is to make accessibility visible. And the only way to do that consistently across hundreds of WordPress sites is through data. Because data is what makes governance measurable. Data helps us move from stories and assumptions to evidence. Processes define how we work, but data tells us how well it's working. Data shows us patterns, where accessibility is improving, where it's lagging, and which parts of our ecosystem need attention. But not all data is created equal. In accessibility governance, we focus on 4 core types of data, and each tells a different part of the story. The first is technical data. This includes automated scans and test results from tools like SiteImprove, Axe, or Lighthouse, or perhaps from the integrated accessibility testing plugins that we're going to discuss after my presentation. This data reveals code-level issues and trends over time. The second is process data. This data provides information about ownership and content review cycles. Who created and published content? Who has modified the content and when? This data tells us who is responsible for accessibility and how often work is reviewed. Then we have compliance data. This data highlights policy adherence, audit completions, and training participation. This data measures how well teams are following institutional standards. And lastly, impact data. Accessibility scores, user testing and feedback, and analytics that show reduced errors or improved engagement after remediation reveal the impact of our work. Together, these data types provide both the technical and the human sides of accessibility. The key is to collect consistently and visualize clearly. Dashboards, trend charts, or even simple spreadsheets can transform data into insight if they're used regularly and shared transparently. Because data alone doesn't create change, shared visibility and accountability do. When everyone from developers to content editors to leadership can see the same picture, accessibility stops being someone else's job and becomes part of the organization's shared accountability. This data makes accessibility visible and actionable across hundreds of sites. So let's see how this works in a real-world example. So I'm going to walk through a case study of the work that I do at the University of Rochester. Across higher education, most of us share a similar challenge. Here we go. Sorry about that. Across higher education, most of us share a similar challenge. Large, decentralized digital ecosystems built over many years by many hands in many different ways. At the University of Rochester, we have hundreds of websites, each built at different times by different teams with varying skill sets, using numerous CMS platforms and inconsistent practices. And this is not unique to Rochester. This is probably almost all higher ed institutions, and it's definitely been the case at every institution I've worked at. We had no unified visibility and needed to bring all those moving parts into one clear picture. So the university's digital accessibility team, which is myself and my boss, we proposed building a system to consolidate all of this data into one place. We proposed and began building a custom web application and dashboard that aggregates data from across our ecosystem to support accessibility, quality, and accountability, and we combine these data streams into one unified view. We call this application the Digital Governance Platform. And to reiterate, this is a custom application. I build and manage this application. I am a developer with front-end and back-end skills. And so, of course, I wanted to build my own because why not? So how does this platform work? The first phase of the governance platform build focused on collecting data. It collects data by crawling university web pages and collecting public data to establish a working inventory of websites and web pages. It imports data from our Site account, which provides another way of building out our inventory and collecting technical, compliance, and impact data on accessibility issues, remediation, and trends. It integrates data from our Google Analytics account, which provides a third way of building out our inventory and provides impact data. Once web pages are registered within the platform runs ACTS and Lighthouse tests to collect even more technical and compliance data. Simultaneously, another platform was being built around the time we started building this platform, and so our university has a system that we call the Web Inventory System. And this system is designed to house a registry of each university website, and it records ownership, responsibility, and process data for each website, including who manages the website, which department sponsors the website, where the website's hosted. If you think of the system like if you're a developer or you're familiar with database design, each website really just kind of has like one row or one record. It's very high level information. It's a title, it's a URL, and then it's some custom fields. The web inventory itself does not contain information about the actual web pages on the website. It doesn't understand the number of web pages. It was designed to really be like an initial source of truth for high-level governance data. And they designed this to have as a system also for our IT team to like help triage issues and know who to contact if there's problems. So it has its own role in our ecosystem. The digital governance platform imports each of these website records from the web inventory and then proceeds to kind of run with it. It collects and processes vast amounts of data about each website and its web pages, and then even reports information it finds back to the web inventory. So it like does QA on the information and makes sure it's valid. The governance platform could eventually absorb the web inventory system. That's not on the roadmap. But keeping them separate during this development and early development has given us flexibility to mature both projects independently. So overall, it was the right decision. And now, after this first phase of data collection, we have our first clear picture. We have our first clear picture of our ecosystem, but really it's only for public information. So For the second phase of our platform build, we are creating a native data integration with each of the university's CMS platforms. And what do I mean by native integration? Well, as I said, during the first phase of the build, the governance platform largely only collected publicly crawlable web page data, similar to the capabilities of a search engine. But with native integrations, the governance platform can have a direct connection to the CMS. So we're building a WordPress plugin that creates custom REST API routes so the digital governance platform can request data from each website to store in the platform for centralized processing and analysis. And with this integration, the platform has a direct connection and can retrieve non-public data. Give me a second, I'll take some water. It can begin to retrieve non-public data. That water did not help, excuse me. Including posts and page, like a clear and authoritative list of posts and pages, a list of users and their levels of access, a list of media items in the menu in the media gallery, so that we can use that to start doing reporting and analysis or remediation of PDFs. Our strategy for PDFs is a whole different presentation. We can collect data about menu items so we can understand which pages are being linked to. We can get lists of active plugins, available plugins, the selected theme. We can know when users log in and create and edit content. So there's a vast amount of data that we can collect, and we're rolling it out in slow phases. But eventually the WordPress plugin will also create new user workflows to monitor and enforce governance processes, including establishing automated content governance review cycles to make sure content is staying fresh and meeting guidelines. It will assist in retiring web content that hasn't been reviewed or doesn't meet governance guidelines. So I'm sure like most of you, we have a problem with just extreme amounts of old content. And so, we're applying a process that applies data and review cycles to help us decide and determine and make decisions about which content can be retired. And then using these integrations to just automate the retirement. Also, we can use the system to remove users who are no longer at the university. We do have single sign-on, so once someone's gone, they can't log in, but their user account is still there. So can we set up a process that cleans that up from our databases? And the answer is yes, we can. We also plan to import our training data into the governance platform, which will allow us to cross-reference a user's training status with their access to edit content and their most common governance issues. Analyzing this insight can help us refine and strengthen our training processes. And so this is where governance moves from observation to automation. We can now see not only what exists, but who owns it, when it was last updated, and whether it meets our policies. Furthermore, we can use these systems to automate governance enforcement and cleanup. This native centralized aggregation with our most widely used CMS will provide invaluable global insight and enable us to use that data to detect and analyze patterns and improve our processes and systems. With this data, we can notice patterns. For example, we can discover that a percentage of our accessibility issues are located on websites that use a specific WordPress theme or plugin. And instead of trying to remediate thousands of pages, we can focus on fixing shared components and templates inside these themes and plugins. We can notice that a percentage of our accessibility issues are located on web pages that haven't been updated or reviewed in over a year, and also might have low traffic. And so from that data, we can archive outdated and low traffic web pages. From our patterns, we can notice that our most common issue across all websites is insufficient color contrast. And when I tell you that Rochester's primary branding colors are yellow and blue, then I, I don't think it's a huge surprise for me to tell you that yes, our most common issue across all of our websites is insufficient color contrast. But with that information, we can increase education and awareness on why sufficient color contrast is important, how to remediate this issue, and provide shared accessible solutions that our teams can use in their web stacks. Instead of auditing every site, we target system level fixes in our design systems and reusable components. And then teams have confidence that when they use these approved components, they are starting from an accessible foundation. It also has reframed accessibility for our leadership. What had been invisible technical work became measurable, visible progress tied to our institutional goals. Because data doesn't just tell us what is broken, it shows us where to focus our efforts for the greatest impact. And we're not the only ones doing this work. I'm excited to share that some peers of mine at the College of Business at Cornell University recently open sourced their own governance WordPress plugin. Now, it's not the same. It's not exactly the same as what we're doing at Rochester, but it's very similar, and it's open sourced and available for you to use if you want to check it out. This plugin helps gather site level accessibility and policy data directly from WordPress. If you're looking to start small, their project is a great model. It is brand new though, so be patient. And they ask that if you have any issues or requests, use the GitHub issues functionality. And yes, I will share these slides after with the recording as well. And I'll post this link in the Slack WordPress WPCampus accessibility channel when we're done. Thank you, Amber, for posting the link in the chat to the GitHub plugin. So whether you build your own system like we did, or you use open source tools like Cornell's, the principle is the same. Collect data you already have, connect it, and make it visible. Once accessibility data is visible, you can prioritize, act, and track progress. And that's what turns accessibility from an isolated task to a shared governance system. At the University of Rochester, every web team has access to our governance platform. Everyone can see their data, monitor progress, and understand how their work connects to broader goals. They can also see other teams' data. One of our guiding principles is transparency. And then accessibility isn't invisible anymore. It's part of our daily practice. We can focus our limited resources on shared system level fixes that multiply impact. Our integrations and workflows make governance repeatable, measurable, and sustainable, which is the power of data-informed governance. It creates focus, efficiency, and shared accountability across distributed teams. What was once invisible becomes measurable and collaborative. Now let's look at a framework you can use to build that same feedback loop inside your own organization. Up to this point, we've seen how data helps us connect systems, reveal patterns, and take focused action. But data alone isn't enough. Governance isn't a one-time initiative or a compliance milestone. It's a continuous cycle, one that helps us learn, adapt, and strengthen over time. Excuse me. Governance requires a structure for continuous improvement. Once we understand that accessibility governance is cyclical, the next question is how to put it in practice. The accessibility governance framework gives us a simple structure, 4 steps that repeat over time and grow with your organization. Measure, interpret, act, and then remeasure. Step one, measurement is where visibility begins. So start by collecting accessibility, ownership, and compliance data from the systems you already use. For example, your WordPress sites. Maybe you have a Site Improve account. Maybe you have Google Analytics or use some other tool. Maybe you have training records. Or maybe you just have tons of spreadsheets. This means both automated results and process indicators, like when a page was last reviewed or who's responsible for maintenance. And the goal isn't to have perfect data, it's to understand your current reality. If you can export it, you can measure it, and even simple CSV files can give you a starting point. Step two, interpret. Data by itself doesn't drive change, insight does. Interpretation means looking for patterns and asking questions. Where are issues concentrated? Are the same issues appearing across multiple sites? Which teams are making progress? What might be blocking teams from making progress? What templates or plugins are introducing repeated errors? Turn that data into insight. Identify risk areas, spot trends, and prioritize improvements based on impact and not just volume. This is where you find opportunities to work smarter, not harder. Step three, act. Acting means using those insights to address root causes and not just the symptoms. Use these insights to drive decisions, improve your processes and systems, and assign accountability. Fix shared components in your design systems, like your WordPress themes. Introduce testing to your CI/CD deployment pipelines to catch issues before they go to production. Improve training and onboarding materials. Automate review cycles or refine your policy language. Each action makes the next cycle more effective. And then finally, remeasure. Check back to see what's changed. Verify progress and share results openly. Visibility builds momentum. When teams can see progress, it reinforces accountability and confidence. Each loop builds trust, momentum, and alignment across teams. Over time, accessibility governance becomes not just a compliance effort, but a shared practice embedded in your culture. This process turns improvement into a habit and one that grows stronger with every cycle. Every new data point shows how your governance practices are working and where to improve. And then the real power of this framework is that it scales. Small, consistent actions add up across large ecosystems. And this framework gives us a repeatable way to manage complexity and celebrate progress, not perfection. Accessibility governance succeeds when it's visible, repeatable, and shared. And the good news is that you don't need a custom platform to apply this framework. You can use familiar tools like Google Looker Studio or Microsoft Power BI. Sorry, I'm laughing because I've never said those words out loud before. Or Tableau, which can handle deeper reporting for enterprise environments. You can use tools like Airtable or Google Sheets. Just be sure to focus on visibility and not perfection, and understand that automation builds sustainability, and that shared data creates shared accountability. So, before we move on to our panel, I do want to share some key takeaways that governance equals the entire system, which includes your structures, your processes, your data, and most importantly, your people. Start where you are and build simple, repeatable processes. Visibility enables accountability, and iteration sustains progress. Automation and transparency scale across our large environments, and continuous improvement beats one-time compliance. As a call to action, I encourage you to start by identifying one accessibility metric you can measure consistently. Share those results with your team and leadership, discuss it, improve it, and make accessibility visible, because that creates accountability and builds trust within your culture. Thank you all for attending. I was a lot to fit in 30 minutes. I can see that there's some questions, but it is time to move on to our panel. If you do have any questions for me about this presentation, feel free to post them in the WP Campus Accessibility channel. And I'm usually lurking around in there and would love to have any conversations with you about our work or how you can implement this framework into your ecosystem.